The Detroit Pistons will look to hire a new head of basketball operations for the first time since 2008, and Cade Cunningham is ready to have say on the roster and team needs. We'll talk about that in just a moment.
Passing lane, skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Welcome back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_313. And before we get into today's show, I just want to say a huge thank you to the entire Pistons Intellect community. We hit 1K subs yesterday on the final day of the season. As I've been saying to start the past few shows, like that was a mini goal of mine to hit that as the season finished. So thank you so much to everyone that's tuned in. If this is your first, second show, or you've been here from the start, I appreciate all of you. 1K subs is really cool, especially with the season we've had and the off season we're about to have. I think it's just so cool to have such a community like that tuning in and supporting the show. So thank you to all of you. I seriously appreciate it. Appreciate you listening to my rants. I appreciate you listening to some of the positive stuff we've had, but mostly negative. But I appreciate all of you, and it means a lot. So thank you. Now, well, we've got a little bit to unpack today. There's two things I want to hit on. The Pistons today held exit interviews for their players, or to the media, I should say. So they had their exit interviews, and I believe every player spoke, as well as we had the news of Detroit officially launching a search for a head of basketball operations. So I think that's where I want to start first, and then there's some comments from Cade I want to hit on to close out the show. So today, Shams of The Athletic announced that, he tweeted out that after a disappointing 14-68 season, the Detroit Pistons have decided to hire a new head of basketball operations and will begin their search process this week. Now, we spoke about this on the last episode. Vincent Goodwill from Yahoo, and he has ties to the Pistons as a past beat reporter. He alluded to that, and we spoke about that in my last video. So that it wasn't too much of a surprise to see this. But following this, James Edwards III of The Athletic released an article this morning, which will be in the description here for you to go and check out if you haven't already. But James released an article with 5 candidates he thinks could potentially be interviewed for the role. And as we speak about all the time, James is incredibly well connected. So if he's suggesting names, I would dare say all these people are in some form of conversations with the franchise. And these 5 candidates, I would say, are all in the mix for the job. James just wouldn't throw out random names there. So I don't want to ruin the article. So I'm going to talk about one candidate that was very interesting to me. But I think we're the most, I guess, so I don't want to ruin the article. So go read it, check out the candidates. And to be honest, like, I don't really feel too comfortable talking about front office and GMs as such, because I feel like last season I'm a bit scarred, and like last season I got so excited about Monty and all the assistants he brought on, all the experience and that, and ultimately I just don't feel too comfortable talking about the GM, or who's going to be the new head of basketball operations until it's announced, because it's just speculation. I'm not a GM, and it's not something I'm comfortable talking on too much. But what I found very interesting, and I will read a couple of quotes from James' article, which I found very interesting, and I think should shed some light on the process. So James said, per team and league sources, Gores and Co are looking to move swiftly to fill this position, which has been vacant since 2018. So I mentioned it on the last episode, but basically the Pistons haven't had a head of basketball operations or president of basketball operations since Stan Van Gundy, who was let go by the team at the end of the 2017-18 season. So that position's been vacant. So there was Ed Stefanski back then. He helped lead the charge for and I believe he was a part of hiring Dwayne Casey. I'm not sure if Alan Talon was there, but it was the Pistons haven't had, like, they were there as advisors, I believe was their title, or they were basically Yeah, but the Pistons haven't had an official like leader. And then I believe it was similar when they hired Troy in 2020. So it's strange the Pistons haven't had that role filled. And I think that goes back to that too many cooks in the kitchens type of thing. And the issue with the leadership here is like just the core pillars just haven't been set right. And it goes back to even how like Monty just seems to have, I think this is dwindled because the season's gone so bad, but it felt like because of the contract he had, he has so much sway and power in the organization more than a normal coach would. So, but James then goes on to say that the futures, and this is super interesting. This is the main part that I found interesting and was a little bit hopeful of, to be honest. But the futures of both General Manager Troy Weaver and head coach Monty Williams could depend on not only if Tom Gores elects to hire a new top decision maker in the front office, but who that person is. It can be assumed that that person would want full authority to hire his own general manager and coach in order to take on the job. So, once again, we sort of spoke about this in the last episode, but it sounds like that, like just reading between what James has said in his past few articles, to me, it sounds like neither Troy or Monty are safe per se, but it sounds like that whoever this new head of basketball operations, if they come in and I kind of can't see why they would want to keep Troy around. Like, but if they don't like what they have with the current setup in the front office and coaching, it feels like they're going to have the power to kind of clean house in that aspect, which I think obviously that's what they should have. If they're at the top of the hierarchy, just below the owner, they should be the one making these decisions. But, and we've heard that Tom Gores isn't afraid to pay out Monty's contract if he's not the guy. So, to me, what it sounds like is, and maybe I don't know if I read this somewhere. I couldn't find the tweet, unfortunately, but I feel like I saw someone say the Pistons are going to try and, James says here they're going to look to move swiftly and fill this position. So I feel like we're going to have a new president of basketball operations in the next couple of weeks. I know the coaching search last summer went on for ages, but I feel like with the amount of change that is needed this summer, I feel like the Pistons are going to, well, James says it, but I feel like they're going to look to fill this void quickly and then make decisions on coaches and front office and obviously the roster. But you would hope, so you don't want this process rushed. I still think like you would want to get this position filled as quick as you can because the draft isn't too far away. Within a month, we'll know where the Pistons are drafting. I think the lottery is normally around mid-May, where we find out where every team's pick will be. So I know, like, you kind of want to have some stuff sorted by at least in the next month because you need to know: are we trading the pick? Are we going to take the pick? What players are we looking to draft with that pick? And just how they're going to navigate just this offseason, because we'll get to some of Cade's comments later, but it feels like if Cade signs that extension this summer, which I hope he does, we should all want him to sign that max extension. But the clock's ticking. Like, because once he has that contract signed, he can ask out and he'll have that I think like the only leverage the Pistons would have is that like Cade doesn't have long-term money locked up yet, which he will get. But like once he locks into that contract, it feels like he can ask out and he'll have power. I don't think that's going to happen, but you just need to get this thing trending in the right direction. And it all starts with this hiring the right guy at the head of basketball operations, figuring out this front office and coaching staff, and then addressing the roster. So that's kind of the update there. One of the candidates was listed was Dwayne Casey, which I found very interesting because he doesn't have any front office experience, I don't believe. Like, obviously, this season he was in more of a front office role or advisor role or that kind of thing. But I don't know. Dwayne Casey didn't, I thought he was fine as a coach. I never slandered him too much. Like, I think we saw this season, like, he actually did quite a fine job throughout the rebuild in terms of getting the most out of the rosters he had. And I think he did that the entire time with the Pistons. But And I know Dwayne for a fact has been doing a lot, like some scouting. He's been at like events where other NBA scouts have been. So he's definitely been a guy looking at talent for this roster. He's obviously got extensive relationships throughout the league. But I just think we need the Pistons. Like my whole thing, I feel like I've been somewhat consistent with this. And this is why I don't. And this is why I've been so big on the front office just needs the most change, is because fresh leadership is so desperately needed, in my opinion. Like it is so stale. The one constant that for the past 4 years has been the front office and who's making decisions. The coaching staff's changed completely. The roster has changed pretty much completely since 2020. Like obviously they have their core four or whatever, but like the roster is completely changed. I believe Cade's the longest tenured Piston. So like it just at some point like you need like just bringing in Dwayne as the head of basketball operations, someone who's already in house, just and doesn't have a lot of front office experience. I just don't think makes any sense. As much as I like Dwayne just as a coach and a person, or like as a leader and how he comes across, like I just think that would just be a step back. So go read James's article. The other four candidates in there, one I just pray to God the Pistons stay the hell away from. But you'll know who that is when you have a read of it. But go read it. James, as always, absolutely killed it, giving us everything and as much knowledge as we need. So yeah, shout out to James as always, and go support him in any way you can. Now, the last thing I want to talk about to close out this video is, as I mentioned before, the Pistons players had their exit interviews today. I believe the coach and GM ones are tomorrow, I believe. But so I'll be back to do a video for that whenever that is. But I kind of just, I'll be honest, I've only watched Cade's interview. The time zone here made it like impossible to watch them all before work this morning. I start work in like an hour. So I think Cade's the guy we all want to hear from. So some of the quotes he had were the one that stood out to me the most, and I think a lot for Pistons fans, was he was asked about giving input on roster decisions and team needs over the summer and going forward. And Cade responded, "Yeah, for sure. I'm very confident in how I see the games and players. I feel like I have a great sense for what guys are made of." And he later on said, "If I'm asked, I'll give an answer every time." So 2 thoughts to this. One, I pray to God Cade gives his input on everything. Obviously, like he's a player, so as bad as this season has been, we've seen in the past players have too much input and the roster doesn't work. But I guess where I'm coming from in this sense is, if I'm Cade Cunningham, I'm saying, please, no more too bigs. Like, no more too bigs. Isaiah Stewart, and I'm a big Stu fan. Like, I think he is going to be an excellent player, particularly in the playoffs, if the Pistons ever get to that point. That's why teams like Boston are always interested into him. But I don't think he's a starting four. I think we know that. The shot improved, but there's so much more you need to do at the 4 position than just to be able to shoot open threes. I think he's just the perfect backup 5. And I think this season he looked his best at the 5. So no more two bigs. No, like that has to go. Optimize spacing. Like, you cannot, in my opinion, continue to play Cade bulk minutes with Asar Thompson, Jalen Duren on the floor, especially if you're putting those 2 plus Jaden Ivey, who's a streaky shooter, and Isaiah Stewart at the 4, who can't. Like, you need to have 2 elite shooters with Cade, and ideally you don't play Asar and Duren many minutes together, because I'm not a big believer in that tandem right now alongside Cade. So I think that's my first. Like, I just want Cade to be like, just the obvious things like that. Like, no more like messing around. Like, we need, like, if you're going to pay Cade the max this summer as well, we need to optimize and see what he can do, because I think he's shown this season he's an all-star caliber player. Still very much so needs to prove he's a number 1 on a winning team. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not here saying he's, going to be an MVP. Like, he still needs to prove a lot. But I think he's proven that I think he's worthy of that max extension in Detroit with the current situation, 100%. But we still need to continue to figure out how far can Cade drag a team that's catered to his needs? Because if we put a team around him this summer and it doesn't necessarily work next season, but then you go, okay, Cade's not a number one. We need to pivot. We need to do this. We need to do that. That's not ideal, but it's better than just continuing to put pieces around him that don't allow him to be at his best. So that's my thoughts on that. The next one Cade kind of touched on was he was asked about signing extension this summer. He said, I've had that on my mind. That's obvious. I make sure I don't get ahead of myself. I could get in a car crash and wasn't able to play anymore. Those things don't happen. I take it day by day. So I think it's a pretty stock standard answer. I found the car crash thing just an interesting way to put it, but I get what he's saying there. Day by day, don't get ahead of myself. I think I would be completely shocked if he didn't sign it. You just I'm pretty confident the Pistons will offer it to him. If they didn't, that would be absolute insanity because it just makes no sense. But just an interesting response there. I don't have too much to put on it. I feel like he's going to sign it, but I just wanted to bring that up in the pod. And then also there's two more things I just want to quickly touch on here. Kay was asked what he wants to improve upon this offseason, and he said the two big things for him are going to be ball handling and conditioning. And I actually really love that because I actually think those are his two most glaring things that need improvement. And in regards to ball handling, I think that comes to reducing turnovers. Cade's passing, often he can throw some passes that are a bit questionable, but I think he also, an area he more so struggles with the turnovers is when he's dribbling in traffic and dribbling towards the rim in traffic at not a full pace, but when he's trying to navigate through, I feel like he's still a bit loose and better perimeter defenders or lengthy defenders just lean in and tap it away from him. And I feel like that's been a bit of a theme throughout his through seasons. It's just dribbling in traffic and because he has a good handle. Don't get me wrong. Okay, he has a great handle, but I think he can just be a little bit loose with it at times. So that I liked hearing that. And then the other thing was conditioning, and I think that can the way I interpreted conditioning is helping him play on both ends more consistently. Because as much as we enjoy Cade's offense this season, he took a big leap, in my opinion, with the shooting. Defensively, it was his worst season in the NBA as a defender. He often just got blown by stance. He stood upright a lot. Cade has all the tools to be a really good defender. I think it's kind of ridiculous to expect a guy with that high usage on offense to be above average defensively, but he needs to improve his effort and energy on that end. And I think that comes with better conditioning. So that's what I took away from there. And then the final quote I'll leave you with was Cade said, I'm excited about changing the narrative about not being able to win games. So the reason I read into that is because I think ultimately what this season and these it's really just this season, but even some of his rookie season, Cade's a winner. This guy's number one pick. This guy all throughout high school was meant to be, he was the next guy. He was a winner. I know he didn't go that far in the tournament, but he was also on not the best Oklahoma State team, but he's a winning player. Cade is not the narrative around Cade right now is trending towards him being kind of a good stats, bad team guy. And I feel like some people put him in the category of more a Zach LaVine, not that they're the same player, but that kind of guy who can put up all-star numbers, but they don't necessarily lead to wins. And I don't think that's who Cade is, but I feel the broader NBA community kind of, those who don't watch Cade a lot, I can see why they would think that, to be honest. It's kind of what Devin Booker dealt with in his first 3, 4, 5 seasons with the Suns. He was seen as that, not to keep referencing, but Zach LaVine guy, big stats on a bad team. Devin Booker dropped 70 points in a losing effort and against the Celtics and copped a lot of flack for celebrating that. And it's just those kind of narratives that get built around these players. But frankly, I believe Cade is more Devin Booker than more Zach LaVine, but he needs to prove it. So, but I'm excited to hear him say things like that. And I'm excited to hear him say, because when you combine that with him having input on the roster, which he should be anyway, but you just hope that the team just makes him priority number one, and we scrap. Like, this is why I don't care if the Pistons trade their first round pick for something that makes sense, of course, but because I just think this whole thing rides on Cade, and you need to figure out and give him a season with decent players and a roster that makes sense around him to prove how far he can take this team. Because, like, we still fully don't know. I think we know Cade's not like going to be obviously a LeBron James or a Victor Wembanyama or like that generational type player. Would be happy to prove him wrong, but I think we know that because those guys will win. Like, I know Victor only won the 22 games, but I feel like those guys are on another tier. But I still feel like Cade hasn't been given the best shot, like a Paolo Banchero, like even a Zion Williamson to an extent, where like they've come into teams who've drafted well or use their assets well to an extent to surround them with teams that make sense and actually give them a chance to compete every night. So I think that'll do it. We're going to be pumping out content. The off season's here. We can start to restore hope a little bit. Although, yeah, the hope is low, but I'm glad the season is over. I don't have much to say about that Spurs game. I don't think there's anything that needs to be covered there. But I'm glad the season's over because those last 3 or 4 weeks were anyone tuning into those games, shout out to you because that was really rough. So that's going to do it for today's show, guys. Thank you once again for the 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, really excited to keep pumping out the content this off season. So till next video, as always, go Pistons.